Over the centuries, London's jewellery trade migrated westward from Cheapside, eventually settling in the area around Hatton Garden. This is where I did my apprenticeship and where I'm still based. Hatton Garden is home to craftsmen and traders from all over the world. It was a similar picture 3.5 centuries ago. At the time of the Cheapside Hoard, London's jewellery trade was dominated by émigré families, French Huguenots, craftsmen from the Low Countries, goldsmiths from Germany. This was an international business in an international city. And it wasn't just the people involved in the jewel trade who came from overseas. It was the jewels themselves.
In the Cheapside Hoard there are gemstones from many parts of the world. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, turquoise from Persia, pearls from Bahrain, and here, in this really beautiful jewel in the form of a salamander.
He's a cute little thing, isn't he?
Are emeralds from Colombia, and you might just make out in the tail.
Yeah, I can see the small rose cuts there.
Little tiny diamonds.
And where do you think they were from?
Well, I think the diamonds came from Burma or India. So in this one jewel, you have the bringing together of the old and new world, and London at the crossroads of this international, very sophisticated gem trade.
He's almost staring at you, isn't he? And I notice he's got a little tongue in there.
You can just make out on the white enamel tiny little black dots to indicate teeth, and on the underside, little flecks
beautiful details.
to indicate scaling.
I mean, when I was an apprentice, I was always taught a piece of jewellery should look just as fine and beautiful from the back as it should the front. And what a perfect example. So you mentioned in the hoard there are many, many different stones from all over the world. My question is, how those stones all got here, and was it quite a risky business?
It certainly was. And there's one document which refers to a jeweller, a Dutchman, who'd spent about 30 years abroad gathering up gemstones and jewels. So,
that collection must have been outstanding.
Well, certainly from the accounts of the time, the crew of the ship were just amazed by what they saw.
I can imagine.
One of them described his cabin was almost afire with jewels for shining. And then on the voyage back, it seems he was poisoned.
Oh my goodness.
And his body was tossed overboard. And then once the ship arrived off the English coast, the ship's carpenter jumped ship with the booty and headed up to the capital. He then tried to sell this material on the London market.
Well, do you think some of these stones could have ended up in the hoard?
Well, there were many hundreds of thousands of them, and it's entirely possible.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Londoners' love of dressing up and adornment fueled the international jewel trade. For the growing merchant class, wearing expensive jewellery was a way of signalling their newfound status and confidence. This is Margaret Cotton, the wife of a wealthy merchant. You can see here she's wearing a ring on her little finger, just as we would do today. But up here you can also see she's had one sewn into her ruff. Rings and other jewels were also attached to girdles and cuffs, basically anywhere you could show off your wealth. Whether nouveau riche or royalty, high society in the early 17th century was all about display. Wealthy women piled their hair high with eye-catching clasps and droplets. Fashionable men wore jewels sewn into their caps and cloaks. Even as fashions became simpler and more restrained, ordinary items like buttons could still be incredible.